The shift to remote and hybrid work over the past 2 years has accelerated application development on cloud infrastructure. However, securing these new assets has lagged behind. Qualys CloudView, the next generation cloud security posture management, delivers an end-to-end multi-cloud security and compliance solution encompassing the entire application lifecycle from build to runtime. CloudView enables enterprises to assess their cloud security and compliance posture, identify risks and gaps, auto-remediate issues, proactively enforce best practices, improve compliance and audits rapidly and efficiently. Identify your most vulnerable cloud assets by visiting securityweekly.com/Qualys. The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra. How is your business staying one step ahead of cyber criminals? Secure your email, applications, network, and data with Barracuda. Protect your business and go from zero to security in no time flat. Whether your team is working in one location or many, Barracuda has solutions that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. Learn how Barracuda can protect your business against ransomware, phishing, and other cyber attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Barracuda, your journey secured. Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Adrian Sanabria. Thank you for listening to or watching our podcast. We want to ensure that we are creating the most relevant and useful content for our audiences across the network. It is crucial to us that we are delivering to you more of what you want to hear and learn about. Please take a few minutes to complete our listener survey so that we can craft our content based on your needs. Please visit securityweekly.com/survey to submit your feedback. All right, gentlemen, articles for the week. There's some really interesting ones. There's a big one on risk management. We're not going to get into all of it. It's like an encyclopedia around enterprise risk management.
Oh my God, it's the Cliff Notes. It's like having the Cliff Notes to risk management.
Exactly right. So I pulled it in here, one, because we just had the conversation with Doug Hubbard on risk calculations and quantification. I thought it was a great reference for people who want to learn more about risk management and the different approaches and the different areas of risk. It's a great reference guide. It's really, really good. But I started today with like the 8 questions to ask before selecting a new board leader. And, you know, we talk about board communications, we talk about leadership and things on this podcast. And when I saw this article, I'm like, ooh, this is a really interesting one for people to think about. Because you could almost ask some of these questions yourself if you want to be a board member, or if you think about this from an alignment perspective, if you're presenting to the board. Like, what are the expectations of a board leader? So I thought there were some really interesting questions in here to think about that you could either use yourself, but more importantly, like others could use to say, like, these are the things that the board's going to be interested in. So how should I present these in a way that they would understand?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the article is incredible. I mean, number one, again, you know, as leaders in cybersecurity, we may get asked to step up to become board members at some point. I mean, think about what's happening in the industry now, what's happening out there where
the SEC,
you know, there's going to be cybersecurity requirements on boards, right? For the SEC.
I don't know if they passed that rule or not.
As leaders, right. But again, you know, even if at some point it doesn't become a mandate, board of directors are going to be thinking about it. And they may sit back and say, you want to know what? Maybe we should have a cybersecurity expert on our board. So, you know, I can see a little bit into the future and say, at some point, you're going to get tapped on the shoulder and be asked to be part of a board. The article is awesome because, you know, it really starts at the basics of, number one, what's the core of the board, right? What's the job description of that board member? What's the job description of that board leader, the president of the board? What's the relationship between the CEO and that board leader, right? These are important things to know, whether you're presenting or on the board. And to be honest with you, I've seen very functional, high functioning boards. I've seen some dysfunctional boards. And, when you go in there, having this ammunition of these questions can help you challenge the process and maybe make that board a little bit better if you're on a dysfunctional board, right? Because now you can sit back and say, listen, we don't have clear roles. We don't have a clear delineation between the responsibility of the CEO and the board president, right? Now you can start helping make that board a little bit more, intuitive and a little bit more easy to work with, and make better business decisions at the end of the day. So this was a great article for presenting to the board, being on a board, and maybe making some change within some boards.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, most people think that the CEO is the board leader, but that's not always the case.
No.
Like there is a separation of the CEO role and the rest of the board, right? It's there for oversight and some other functions. And so it's a really interesting, because I don't think most people think about that the board leader being not the CEO, Jason. And I think there was a good article that kind of articulates it. Yeah. The board leader isn't necessarily your CEO.
That's almost a conflict of interest. One of the most important things, jobs of the board, is that they can fire the CEO if the CEO is making the wrong decisions, and help appoint a new one and find a new one. So it's talking about alignment with the board. Yeah, you don't necessarily want it to be, the comfiest, safest lineup according to the CEO, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly right. Next article, how CISOs can manage the cybersecurity of high-level executives. Kind of ties into this last one a little bit, right? The board, the high-level executives, what's going on? This one gets really interesting for me because there are some really interesting challenges that I think CISOs face when it comes to executives. And I think personnel in general, like I was having a conversation with one of our CISO advisory board members, and he brought up a point. He goes, there are some things that we get tagged to fix that we have no control over. Like how do we do it? Like I can't necessarily fix my employee's home network.
Yeah.
And that is now a common place for people to work. Like I have no control over their home network per se, right? Like there's a lot of challenges that the CISOs get that also kind of get exacerbated when you're dealing at the executive level.
But I've seen them doing exactly that, though, right? Like going out and trying to strengthen their executives' home networks. Like that's a thing I see CISOs doing now.
Oh, of course, 100%. I was going to say it's a fine line now, because now we have to teeter into the personal lives a bit, right? The article highlights it, but I've personally seen this happen to executives within firms where they come to us, for advisory services on how to deal with this. They have a direct family member who's been catfished, and then they leverage, because it's on a computer within their house. Then they leverage and get a little bit of data on the family, right? And then they use it against the executive. And then they call the board. They call the CEO of that executive and say, I have some really risque material, or I have some data on this executive. And they start to blackmail not only the person personally, but they start to blackmail the organization. And they do it in tiers. First, they blackmail the person they catfished. Then they blackmail the parent who's an executive. Then they blackmail the organization. And it's just that iterative process working their way upstream to get more and more money. This is a reality these days. They're hitting executives' personal lives so that way they can eke their way into the business.
Yeah, this is a topic that came up a lot when I covered endpoint security at 451 Research. I remember at one point just thinking, it was right around when Next Gen AV came out. And AV just wasn't working. Stuff was getting past it left and right. So you had Cylance and CrowdStrike bringing in these new approaches. And I remember thinking, and so I'm talking to these companies constantly, and saying, okay, so now you've got this like super double awesome AV, that you're installing on top of the regular AV, and like we've got all the stacks of protection on the corporate laptop. what happens when the CEO like jumps over to their personal device and like none of that's there? You know, you don't think attackers know that like those devices are going to be less protected? You know, so I started talking about the idea of, look, if employees, if you're not protecting the people, you know, you're not protecting the employees, you're not protecting the company. You know, so I started to see this trend start where I think Webroot was the first one I saw do it, where one license of their product for an employee was actually five devices. You know, and they made it 5 because they thought that was enough to cover both corporate owned and personal owned devices.
Right.
And I thought that was a really good way of thinking about it, a really good trend to see in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the other side too is, you know, many executives within organizations, they're thought leaders. They want to be out there. They want to be on social media. They want their bios on websites. They want their information all over the place.
Yeah.
And at some point,
they're marketing and salespeople.
You have to weigh the risk, right? Because all of that information, if they're giving out too much information, now they're exposed. And then they're exposed to become part of that blackmail situation, right? Yeah. Where now you have a malactor coming in doing some OSINT on the executive and then figuring out a way that they can start blackmailing them, right? Yeah. Or do some social engineering on them.
So this is a whole category now that we've noticed emerging last year, a little bit before last year, but mostly last year, where they're products for personal safety and better like OPSEC that enterprises buy for their employees, for them to be personally more safe. Like Tall Poppy is an example of this. Because good habits at home, good habits at work, right? Is the idea.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. 100%. And I think at the end of the day, that's the security leader's job, the CISO's job, is to educate. Yeah. Educate on, the corporate responsibility, but also what's out there as far as risks from a personal level.
Yeah.
Right. And just continue to educate, partner with the executive team, partner with the CEO, partner with the board, and just educate them on what's happening out there. So that way they can better prepare themselves for that risk.
That's why you see this evolving space around human risk management. It's still the human element that we have to solve, right? And it's been a challenge, right, over the years. I mean, we know where the majority of these attacks come from. It comes from a lapse in human judgment somewhere that creates an opening. We don't spend enough time there. Are we ever going to? Technology by itself is never going to solve this, right? We can put the best endpoint detection on all my systems, but it's not going to go on my phone, and I'm still going to click some smishing link and do something silly, right? It's just it is making sure that the human element of this understands the risk. They think about it and they don't take the step, but that's hard. And when you think about all the employees you have to educate to get to that level, it's no easy task for sure.
Yeah. And then make it something that people actually want to consume, right? Yeah. The history of cybersecurity training has been, go to this website, click, and people ignore it. It becomes white noise. So how do you make it engaging enough for folks to consume it and retain it?
Correct.
That's the key. That's the science.
Yeah. But it's a combination of things, Jason, right? Because I'm in this space now. It's not only the quality of the content, but it's other elements that kind of reinforce it and kind of get it to stick.
It's got to be something you use. You can tell people stuff all day, but if it's not something they use on a day-to-day basis, it's gone.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. And as leaders, you actually have to do it instead of just say it.
Yeah. I think we have an article that talks a little bit about leading by example.
I'm looking at the next one's coming up.
Yep, exactly right. I've been pulling in whenever it's funny because I see these Forbes articles pop up sometimes on my phones and I forward the link to myself because they're writing some great articles on leadership and communication and things. And so this one is really about building trust and why it's important and the components of building that trust, right? And it's the things we talk about: be transparent, be flexible, reach out and communicate, right? These are things that are just important parts of not only building trust, but being a good leader. Like when we get to a great leader article, which is right behind this one, you're going to hear some of the same pieces here, right? They are not only leadership skills, they are building trust skills that are important, especially right now. Like last week, was it the big tech layoffs, like Microsoft, Amazon, and somebody else? There was like huge, the last couple of weeks have just been tough for the tech market.
Right.
Yeah, I think Google was 12,000. I think that was the most recent one.
Yeah, Microsoft was like 10, I think.
Yeah, and it was a bunch of people that had either just joined the company and had just been promoted. So they're. I'm not sure how well they chose the people they're going to lay off. I guess when you're going to lay off that many people, you don't have time to personally, look at each case.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for the article on building trust, a lot of those items were items that we talk about a lot, but one of them that really stuck out to me was, not just the communicating effectively, but it goes into like use subject matter experts that are at your disposal, right? Partner. So it's like leave your ego at the door. Make sure your tone when you communicate is an effective tone, right? Not an egotistical tone, but also use subject matter experts around the organization. So that way you have the pulse of what you can say and what you communicate to be effective, right? And for people to actually want to consume it and listen to it. Don't just communicate from your own little lens, right?
Yep.
Use subject matter expertise and folks from around the organization. Take that team approach.
But I think some of the biggest morale issues I've seen in companies are when, maybe they speak to some of these values, but when it comes time for them to demonstrate, it's it's do what I say, not as I do, and I think that's the biggest thing. People come to me all the time and they say, here's the problem I'm having at work. Like, I feel like nobody cares about the security work that I'm doing. And it's this issue where, either they say that they're transparent, but then they're not actually transparent or, and all these things here. But yeah, it's super important to recognize those opportunities to act, and actually do what you say, and sometimes it's uncomfortable opportunities. Maybe it's a breach, that you're having, or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, I'll say another big one is the flexible one. There was an item in there to be flexible, and I put a little added to it, flexible and collaborative, right? Because in many instances, the security team can be seen as militant in a roadblock. And we do not want to be seen as militant in a roadblock. So having the ability to be flexible and collaborative is huge, right? So understand the outcome that business unit is trying to achieve. And I always use the analogy of the highway, right? So I live in the 95 corridor. And maybe it's not Route 95 that we're going to take today to get you to your destination, because there's traffic and there's construction and there's a lot of, issues on 95 this day and age. So maybe we'll take 295. It'll get you there safer and most likely faster, because you're not dealing with construction and you're not dealing with the accident. You're not dealing with all those risks on 95. So talk about the outcome.
Yep. Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a little bit on some of the communicating value. But we just hit points 2, 3, 4, and maybe 8 on the next article, which is how to be a great leader. We talk about lead by example, communicate effectively, build trust, which then fosters a very positive culture, I think. So we kind of hit those bullets pretty succinctly on the last one.
Yeah, I mean, empowering your team, right? Don't be a control freak, right? You hired these folks for a reason. Trust them. Allow them to go do their job and do it effectively, right? So don't get in the way. Many times leaders have a problem, not pulling themselves out of the day-to-day. They want to be in the weeds, but you're not going to have an effective team if you're micromanaging, right? You have to empower them to do their jobs. That's why you brought them on board.
And then the flip side, if your calendar's 100% covered and you're never around because you're always in a meeting.
True.
There's
right. Yeah. Right. It's a balance, right? Oh, yeah. The other piece too is continuous improvement, right? I mean, it's a journey. You always want to be improving. You always want to be taking the business to the next level. You always want to be progressing in what you do. You lose good people when you become stagnant. So don't allow your team and your program to become stagnant. Always look to improve. There's always room to improve your program. There's always room to improve what you're doing from a training perspective. Continuously improve the organization.
Yep. We're going to skip the risk management article. Like I said, it is a wealth of information.
Yeah.
And if you want some background on risk management from the Doug Hubbard interview we just did, this is a great resource. But it's a really long article. Like I was going through this and it just kept on going. Use it as a reference. I want to focus more on these last couple communications articles because the first one talks about the 7 rules to communicate the value of IT, which also plays into the value of security from a CISO perspective. And actually kind of switches from the CIO to the CISO in this article a little bit, which I thought was interesting. But there's some really interesting things that people have to really get their arms around when it comes to outcomes and value, right?
Yep.
We've been thinking about this a lot more internally. Like, what's the value of our service and our capabilities to our customers, right? And then how do we improve that value and improve the outcomes for them? But the value is determined by them, not by us, right? It's kind of rule number 1. And it's, do we really understand the value to our customers? Like, that's just a really interesting starting point for thinking about value and outcomes is, do we actually understand what our customers want? What's valuable to them?
Right. It's funny. Rule number 1 took me into that Wayback Machine. And I think it was Saturday Night Live that did it, where you had the IT guy, where somebody was struggling on their computer and they couldn't get things done. And you had the IT guy walk in and go, click, 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 and then give him a really hard time for being stupid and then like walk away. Right? We cannot be that. That is not IT. That is not security. We are enablers to the business, right? So take that ego, throw it aside. Value isn't determined by what's in between your ears and what you brought to that keyboard, right?
Yep.
It's about the value that you brought to that consumer, to that client, to that end user, to that business unit. That's where the value is determined. That's how you have that metric on value. And it's not about what you did. It's not about you.
Something I like to point out is that it's possible to have negative value. You can actually
absolutely
you can hurt more than help.
100%.
Maybe what that IT guy was coming over and click, 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 click. Maybe he was removing the security software, and that enabled them to get their job done.
Right.
and he actually produced more value than the security team who put that on there without checking to see if it would break workflows. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. You just described, Jason, rule number 4. Measure IT's impact on stakeholders' objectives, not IT effort expended.
That's it. Yeah. Right. It is. Again, the ego, we forget that we're in a service industry.
Right.
Technology departments are service-oriented. You're providing a service to the business. Well, what does that mean? Serve. That's where the value lies. How you're serving your clients and your users.
Right.
That's it. And no other.
And this goes back to the business discussion we had earlier, right? It's aligning your costs and your investments to those different business initiatives is part of that service, right? And that's sometimes where we can't articulate why we're spending or investing this to actually enhance the business service. And that is such a critical component, not only for the IT folks, but for the security folks. Because if it's not aligned, you're not, especially in this environment right now, you're not going to get it.
Right. And it's funny that this one was on the list because it's great. Every time I started in a new company as a leader, either leading IT, leading cybersecurity, leading a business unit, the first thing I would ask the CFO is, do we cross-charge other business units in this company? Because that was my ability to say, now I can start allocating, right, what it costs to support this other business unit. Allocating dollars around that.
Yeah.
So if you went out and hired an IT services organization, HR, this is what you would have paid. Right? So now I can start aligning that monetary value in that cross-departmental charging capability. And to be honest with you, even if we didn't as an organization, I always made sure we did in the department. Just at any point in time, I'd be able to say to one of the business leaders, you want to know what the value we brought to the table this year was? Here it is.
So,
monetary value we brought to the table.
You just asked a question or just answered a question I was going to bring up. And defining value is hard. And I think there's probably some value in actually writing down like what the value prop is. It's not only difficult within security teams, but for security products as well. Back when I used to do, when I was building product testing, I think that was one of the most useful steps of testing a product is to say, what does it mean to implement this to where it's producing value and how you maintain that level of value? How can you tell if that value goes up a little bit or goes down a little bit? If you have no way to measure it, how would you even know, that the value is completely gone and it's gone into the negative, right?
Right. So again, I've always made it a habit to have that metric around financial investment, return on investment at a business unit level, to be able to have that conversation with the leaders to show how much value we brought to them within their business. Now, rule number 3 kind of aligns with it too, because it says build 2 value narratives, run and change. Over the course of my career, I've always built 3. How do I help the organization run, grow, and transform? Those are 3 different mindsets, right? Run is keep the lights on. Grow is to get, a little bit of growth within their business unit or the company, as a whole. Transform is, what are you doing to actually transform the operations of this business? What are the transformative projects, right? That's different investment mentality at that point. Keep the lights on, get some growth, transform the entirety of this business. So those are the narratives I've always put in place.
In the product world, we call that, things like maintenance, market share, and mind share, right? It's the balance across those 3 areas of how you think about features, what's maintaining and running the core business, what are those opportunities to grow market share and grow, and what are those things you're going to do that just takes you to the next level, right? Those are always the balances that have to be managed.
Yeah, and also from a product perspective, I kind of think of like growth as iterative innovation. Like you've got innovation that's not huge, but it is innovation, and then the transformative stuff, which is the other what people really think of when they think innovation. Like a totally
it's
different approach.
It's the more
to
disruptive.
Doing something. Yeah,
it's the more disruptive innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, in a good way.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Yes.
You hope so, right? You hope so. Last article, I actually pulled this 2 weeks ago, but I didn't pull it in. The 5 major communication skills you should possess in 2023. It's an interesting list. I actually possess all 5 of them, which I thought was interesting because I was like, ooh, because I was curious what they were. And I was like, okay, so I've got all 5, but others would look at this list and go, well, how do I do better in some of these areas? So I thought it was a really interesting way to think about some of the things you're going to have to face in your career. And if you're going to build a better communication skill set, like use these 5 as like a starting point.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I looked at the list and I said the same thing. I have all 5, but for me, it's about which one of these areas do I need to improve on, or multiple areas do I need to improve on in 2023? Where can I focus a little bit? Over the course of the last 2 years, I haven't done a ton of public speaking, between pandemic and things of that nature, starting a new job, working on a business. I haven't done a ton of public speaking. So I'm like, you know what? Time to step it up in 23, aside from the podcast, right? But it's not in front of a a group of, a few hundred people or whatever. So it's like, now, you know what? Time to step it up. Time to get back into the public speaking arena and sharpen those skills again, because it got dull over the course of the last 2 years while I was busy.
If RSA accepts my speaking presentation, I'll get back to the stage at some point too. Otherwise, it's just the podcast on a weekly basis. Right. Yeah, for sure.
Another big one for me is, some people look at this as a negative aspect, but negotiation is huge, right? And I want folks to realize that negotiation isn't a battle. It's not a fight. It's compromise. It's finding a middle ground, right? Unfortunately, as a country right now, we're very divided. And our definition of negotiation is battle these days, because you're either on one team or another, whether it's politically or in sports or whatever the case may be, social media. It's everybody's taking sides and taking teams and putting on jerseys. Yeah. Negotiation's about compromise. It's about middle ground. And I think we need more of that in our lives today in every aspect. Yeah. We need more.
Yeah. If you don't come to the table ready for some sort of compromise, then why even come to the table? Why bother?
That's right. Absolutely it.
Trust me, every business is having these internal negotiations right now.
Yeah.
Like, where are we going to spend? Where are we going to cut? How are we going to reallocate? Yeah. Every business is going through this, right? Negotiation skills, especially in an economic environment. Forget about the political environment for a second. Even the economic environment, those skills are going to be handy because you are having a lot of discussions around compromise when it comes to investment and cost reductions in various areas. Right. And those that understand sometimes I have to give something up to get something else, those are going to be important skills to have in this environment.
Yeah, 100%. Especially going into the financial uncertainty of 23. I mean, ending 22, we're hearing all these horror stories about recession and, it's and everybody's trying to shore up right now and make sure that if something were to happen, they can weather the storm. So your ability to negotiate and make good decisions is critical over the course of the next 12 months.
And number 4 is deteriorating so much, I feel like. I can't tell you how much my life is spent asking people to re-ask their questions or to repose their statements, because half of it happened in their head and then the other half came out of the fingers, and I'm missing that context to understand what the heck they're asking me, what they want.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's funny. I'm seeing a lot with younger employees who are so used to that instant gratification of communication of text messaging. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm seeing text messaging in business communication more and more often.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's our opportunity to help guide this next generation of employee into effective communication. Because I mean, honestly, my son at this point is like 3-word text messages to me sometimes, and all I do is answer back ? And that's me. Articulate yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
can you give us the background?
It's our job to help mature that a little bit.
I do
exactly. Right. Well, we do it in writing it. I'm reading something. I'm like, we haven't defined what that means yet. Like, we're using acronyms before we define them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of acronyms and a lot of industries that overlap. Like, we've got to define this stuff. We have to give the background. Otherwise, a lot of this stuff just people don't understand it because they're not from the industry, or they're from a different industry, or you have conflicting acronyms, like things like that, like basic things. I still see them all over the place.
That's where active listening comes in on number 3. I learned that real quick when I was an industry analyst, because almost every call, sometimes companies were coming up with their own unique acronyms, and they talk so much internally, the marketing teams, that they forget that their friggin' audiences have no idea what they're talking about. Right. And so I got used to that real quick. Okay, I'll ask the dumb question. What in the world is this? What are you talking about? Like, I remember finding out that north-south, east-west, like in terms of network communications, that there are like 3 or 4 variations of those. Like just because somebody says north-south or east-west doesn't mean it's your north-south and east-west.
Right.
Like I found for some people, East-West is like servers and user segments. And for other people, like it's much more specific than that. It's like DMZs and server segments. Like I found out just by being the guy willing to ask the dumb question that, actually, I assumed your East-West was my East-West, but it's not.
It's not. Yes, clarity. Good skill sets to have. Listen, write it down, define it. All these
don't
great
assume
things. Yeah, right. Don't assume. I'm also listening to the audience right now going, okay, guys, wrap it up. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.